Welcome to Conversations with Kelly, where we take a deep dive into topics that are important to the business community. I'm Kelly Basil with the Delaware State Chamber of Commerce, and today we're going to be talking about well-being in the workplace. With me today, I have Dr. Heather Farley, Chief Wellness Officer at ChristianaCare, and I also have Jackie Catalano. Did I say that right?
You did.
Director of Facilities Management and Site Services at AstraZeneca. Thanks so much for being here with me.
Thanks for having us. Absolutely.
Yeah. Before we take a deep dive into this, we are going to have a quick word from our sponsor. The Conversations with Kelly podcast is powered by Easter Seals Delaware and Maryland's Eastern Shore, and they're marking a huge milestone, their 75th anniversary. Easter Seals is celebrating 75 years of creating an inclusive community, 75 years of first steps for children, independence for adults with disabilities, and support for seniors and their families. Easter Seals is celebrating 75 years of a legacy, ensuring a future where everyone is 100% included and 100% empowered. And they're just getting started. Happy anniversary to Easter Seals Delaware and Maryland's Eastern Shore. To learn more or donate, visit de.easterseals.com. That's de.easterseals.com. Before we get started, I do want to just give you both a moment to talk about who you are and what you do for your respective companies. Heather, will you go first?
Sure. So I'm Heather Farley. I'm an emergency physician by training and the Chief Wellness Officer at ChristianaCare. So in that role, I oversee our Center for Work-Life Wellbeing, and our mission in the center is to foster work-life meaning, connection, and joy. So that is, we oversee all of the efforts to improve the environment for our caregivers and improve their caregiver experience and create an environment where they can flourish.
And that has to be such a huge responsibility, especially after the last few years that we've been going through.
Absolutely. The last 3 years, I think for all of us, have been challenging on an individual basis and for teams, for organizations, for our community as a whole. But as we know, it's particularly challenging in the healthcare environment.
Yeah. Well, you're doing really great work. Jackie?
Yes, I'm Jackie Catalano. I am Director of Facilities Management, Site Services, Safety, Health, and Environment for AstraZeneca, the Wilmington site, and also support our 5,000 field sales representatives as well. And my job is, one, to run the site, run the entire campus, but also make sure that it is a great place to work. So making sure that all of our employees feel connected, have resources there at the site for mental health, for just having a great experience when they come to the workplace, and also out into the field, because they are a little bit separated, that they know that they have a home base.
Oh, and how many people are at your site?
So we have around 1,300 employees in Wilmington. We have around 200 what we call OSPs, those that are there at the site with us. So we probably on a daily basis have around 1,400 to 1,500 people on the site.
A lot of people.
Yeah.
At the chamber, there's 9 of us, so very different.
Very different.
Okay, well-being at work. What does that mean? Why is it important? Who wants to take it?
Yeah, I think it's actually incredibly difficult to define well-being at work specifically, and I think it means different things to different people. I think one of the misconceptions around well-being at work is that it's so focused on mental health diagnoses traditionally, and so helping people get the services that they need if they're suffering from depression or anxiety or substance use. But it is so much more than that, and I think that the pandemic has actually brought that into more clarity for people, knowing that they need more support at work, and that it's actually not just about supporting those mental health conditions. It's about creating that environment where you can thrive at work, and so and that's so multifactorial. And I know we'll dive into that in a little bit more detail.
We definitely will
in the show.
And do you kind of agree with that
No,
definition?
I totally agree. I think there's, to your point, I think that stigma of mental health, but there's just so much more, and the pandemic, without a doubt, brought that up to a high level when we just think about what's happening in the economy, what's the gas prices, food prices, what's going on in the workplace, what's going on at home, and then how that all comes together and how we help our employees through that. And starting those discussions, I think, is what's very important right now.
And what does it mean to prioritize well-being for your employees? As you kind of already alluded, Heather, it's so much more than just making sure they get the services they need. What can employers do to help their employees succeed?
So, I mean, I think if as an organization, you're going to say that you have a commitment to the health and well-being of your employees, that
Right.
you actually have to make that part of your strategic plan and something that you are committing to, something that you're measuring, tracking, and holding yourself accountable for first and foremost. And then I think just getting back to the previous question around what does that look like, I think traditionally people have attempted to put most of their efforts into the personal well-being of their employees. So helping them to eat better, giving them advice around how to eat better, nutrition counseling, physical fitness, and more personal mental health. But there's an analogy I often use when I talk about this, and it's the canary in the coal mine. So you can't take the canary, teach it to be more resilient, stick it back in the same coal mine and expect it to survive. Right? You actually have to change the coal mine. So trying to get your individual employees to be more well individually, it's important, but it's not the total package. What's actually much more impactful from an organizational standpoint is impacting the environment around them. So creating a culture of well-being and actually also a place that runs efficiently. As we know that that inefficiencies in the workplace are also a huge driver of dissatisfaction and
stress.
And stress, yes, exactly.
But I think over the last few years, this has become extremely challenging. To your point, as we ask employees to come back. So some employees, I imagine a lot of healthcare had to come in.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of us are facing where you could do a lot of work remote. And now we're asking them to come back in, or we've been asking them to come back in. And to your point, these priorities have all shifted. So it's not just creating that safe culture. How do we really continue that conversation? It is ever changing, and it's been ever changing for the past 3-4 years now, since the beginning of the pandemic till now. How do you have to lead that culture and show that you're definitely invested into it, which I don't know that we do that well. Not AstraZeneca. I think we're doing a very good job of it. But I think as a culture, are we doing well? Realizing all of these other stresses that employees are on their shoulders right now, and then asking them to come to work and do a great job and, have this performance level up here. We have to realize this balance. It's always been a work-life balance issue. It's just so much more exaggerated.
What are some examples? So, I mean, you're both basically saying practice what you preach, but what are some examples of that? What are some of the things that you're doing specifically around creating this kind of culture, helping work-life balance? I'm just curious.
First of all, I'm going to jump in and say I fundamentally hate the word or the phrase work-life balance. I think that it's aspiring to something that's impossible. So, that's my personal pet peeve there. I prefer the work-life integration or work-life harmony.
Okay.
Because I think the balance is something that is just impossible to attain, and it sets people up for failure. Yeah. But I think one of the, I talked about creating a culture of well-being. And so what does that look like? I think one of the aspects of that is creating a culture of safety. So both physical safety and psychological safety for employees. It's an environment where employees feel empowered that their voice is taken into account in the decisions that impact their work and their life. It means having a sense of esprit de corps and camaraderie on a team. And we also know that having choice and control and autonomy are big drivers of well-being. So, and there's so many ways that you can do this, but these are some of the sort of big categories. And I guess I would say finally, the connection to meaning and purpose is huge. And that's become even bigger, I think, for people as they've re-examined the role that work has in their life. And they want to feel like we're putting so much time into our work. It should be meaningful. So it should be doing something that that is towards a greater purpose. So how can you help people find what that is for them and do a little bit of job crafting so they can get just a little bit more of that? So.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Sense of belonging has become really important in the last few years. It's always been important, but it's definitely become more of a priority for people when they're looking for somewhere new to work or if they're choosing to stay. And so an employer helping kind of share that vision and mission and then make them feel like they're a part of achieving that is so important.
Agreed. I think also having to your point, an environment where you come into. So one of the things I think employers are starting to realize now is the change of what what the whole workplace looks like, that they do have a choice now. It is not going to an office and sitting behind a desk, but you have, from a wellness whole strategy, that the entire office is all built around wellness. So you don't have to sit at the same desk. You have the ability to get up and move around, these unallocated seatings, these more open, more light, not being tied down to a desk every day, I think is also something that's really important, that as you come into the workforce or back into the office, not to be back into what we left. But you're back into a more of an open environment, what people enjoyed when they did go home. They had their living room, they had their kitchens, and our offices are starting to resemble that a little bit more, to give people that ability to get up, move around, have that sense of wellness throughout the day. It's not sitting and being plugged in, but actually getting around, collaborating, having that human interaction and experience again. I think that's very important for people.
Those are great points. Like, you know, building on what we know are human needs for us to thrive, right? And so one of them is that human connection. So how do you design a workplace that actually makes it easier for people to connect? And it's so much more important now than ever, particularly given the hybrid environments that we're in. And then I think, you know, the other piece around that is understanding how our brains work too, and respecting that when we are in the workplace. So we need micro breaks. So we can't work 8, 10, 12 hours straight at peak performance. Our brains are, you know, we're much more effective and productive if we have micro breaks, and we don't see that as a sign of weakness, but as something that we need to build in to be maximally productive. So like, how do you build that into your workday? You know, maybe you have, rather than the company culture is that we have hour-long meetings or half-hour-long meetings, it becomes the norm is 25-minute meetings and 50-minute meetings. So you build in that break between all of those Zoom calls back to back, so that you can actually, you know, go grab a snack, go to the restroom, return a text about your kid's school,
right,
whatever that is.
Well, and I think too, it's not all like one size fits all. You know, every individual within a company has kind of different needs, and you know, needs. People need to step away for that 10 minutes. Other people, they need their lunch break. And so, you know, being able to be flexible as an employer and let people have what they need in order to perform, recognizing that's pretty big. I'll tell you, the whole back-to-back meeting thing, it's getting exhausting. So my 2023 thing, no meeting Thursdays. My whole calendar on Thursday is blocked. I have no meetings. I've only done it a couple of times so far, but it's been wonderful. So
you need that time, I think, to like take a deep dive into projects sometimes, and if you're back-to-back meetings all the time, you don't have time to think, you don't have time to strategize, and you don't have time to connect with other people.
Yeah.
It's extremely stressing that way. And I do, what you said about flexibility, I think is also something that employers have to really focus on as we're back into the workplace more. And flexibility looks so different for whatever type of role you're in. Is it flexible that you just want to be able to put your children on the bus in the morning because you feel better about seeing them off than going in, and that means your day starts a little bit later? Or is it that you need to leave a little earlier? Is it that you need that lunch break in between? Is it that you want to work from home for a few hours just for the like heads down, get my emails done, then go in for the human interaction? It looks different. I think that's what the challenge, I think, is employers are trying to figure out what that flexibility looks like and how to accommodate everybody. To your point, in your workforce, we're all not the same. We all have different needs, different wants. And how do they get that across? It's a hard message to land. It's a really hard strategy.
Well, and it's very much in demand right now by employees. As you mentioned, there's a lot of choices out there for people. They can very easily go to another company who will give them that. And that really wasn't the culture prior to the pandemic. And now employers are like, oh man, like I need to make my employees happy. So this is really important.
Yeah, it is.
And it's a differentiator for companies, I think, who do that well.
Yeah, and it's almost a return on investment to the company when you do right by your employees. You know, happier people have higher productivity, more collaboration. You treat them with dignity. They want to come to work.
That's right.
You know, there are things that help the business in the end by focusing on your people.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And it's so well said. We have lots of conversations around what's the ROI on doing this. And some of it is a return on investment, but some of it is a VOI, of the value of the investment.
Yes.
And to some extent, this is, number one, just the right thing to do as human beings, that we need to take care of one another. And it doesn't cost a ton of money to do some of these things that can create that environment that supports our employees' well-being. So it's the right thing to do. And there is an ROI as well.
Exactly.
You know, as you so eloquently said, that we know when our when employees have a better experience and they're engaged and they feel supported, they are more productive and more creative.
So you're both from larger businesses, and there are people dedicated to this. What about a smaller business who, also needs to think about these things, but, there's people wearing more than one hat. So how can they help build this kind of a culture? It's a tough question.
Well, I think there's we're very fortunate, as you said, like we're a larger company, and so we can have a larger infrastructure. But I give I give talks to smaller organizations or people who are in smaller places all the time. And that is a question I get is how can we do this if we don't have those resources?
Right.
And there are so many things that you can do that don't cost a lot of money. So, one of the examples I think is we talked about those micro breaks.
Right.
So building that in is one that doesn't cost any money. That's a simple thing to do. I think another example is helping to connect people to that meaning and purpose again. So helping people do some of that job crafting so they feel like they have a bit more autonomy in how they spend their time and that they're doing more of what they find meaningful. And there's also ways that you can celebrate that for people. And so there's, another thing about our brains is that the negativity bias. So our brains are hardwired to pay attention to the negative stuff. So we as leaders, one of our jobs is to make the positive stuff more sticky for our employees. So how do we pay attention to the things that go right and recognize people and also, show them how what they've done connects to a larger purpose. So one of the things that we do at ChristianaCare is called the Thank You Project. So we bring patients and their families back to meet the caregivers who took care of them and to explain, what the experience was like for them and the impact that these folks had on their life. And, it's so easy for it to just move on to the next patient and not know what happened. So it usually when we have these events, they're incredibly emotional and impactful. And the caregivers, the nurses, the doctors, even our environmental services and nutrition people, we bring the whole team back in. And they leave those events feeling like, oh my gosh, this is why I do what I do.
Yeah, that has to be really inspiring to have people come back and see that they're doing well after your hard work.
And so I think that translates to smaller, companies or cultures as well, where it's possible to get creative around connecting people to the impact of what they do and making that positive stuff more sticky.
Jackie, are there any unique things that you do at AstraZeneca?
For employees, from a wellness perspective,
Yeah,
we do quite a bit. So to your point, we do a lot of outside of the box. So we have plenty of HR benefits about our wellness and options, but non-traditional. We do have the nutritionist on site. We do have a wellness center. We do have a fitness center. We have meditation breaks 2 times a day that you can either style into just to take that 10-minute micro break, or they're already pre-recorded that you can go in at any time. Things as mother's rooms that we have built just so that moms have a place to go when they come back to the workplace. Talk about stress coming back into the workplace from a mental health perspective, coming back, knowing that you have to juggle that additional. We have places for them to go as well. Meditation rooms for folks that are not new mothers, but just need a place to go and get away from everybody. We do that. We have that available as well. And wellness coaching. So we do have a wellness coach on site daily with us as well that you can also utilize her services, or we have an EAP, one of our EAP counselors come on site once a week as well on Tuesdays.
What's EAP?
Employee assistance programs.
Thank you.
But I'm exactly what you just articulated is such a great example of going beyond just caring for the personal well-being. So there's a big difference, I think, between saying, here's the services, go figure it out, and actually incorporating it into the culture and bringing it into the workplace. So the fact that you have those meditation times blocked in there and you have those services as part of the workplace, this is just how we do things here. I think
it is
that's
amazing.
Really powerful.
The apps are right there at your fingertips. We have the Healthy Minds app as well. So if you don't know where to go, we have a Microsoft Teams platform. You have the Healthy Minds app that's built into our platform. So if you're not familiar at all, what we do is just say, hit the Healthy Minds app. Everything comes up at your fingertips. So you know what's available, what you can utilize there at the site. Or if you're virtual out in the field, that you have the same opportunities virtually as you do on site.
And so another thing, we're talking a lot about, stuff at the workplace, but also, when they go home at night, there's, making sure we leave each other alone and respect our personal time. I think that during the pandemic as well, people were nonstop working. We were nonstop talking to each other because we had to. And now it's almost the norm that you're on call always. So remembering, there's delayed delivery on your emails. You don't have to email someone at 10 p.m. at night. And, what are some other things like that we can help kind of respect people outside of work?
Yeah, I think that's really important. That's a great example of the work-life harmony piece. And I think also being a bit more open-minded about what that looks like for different people. So, when you start talking about setting boundaries, some people may interpret that as, okay, I'm going to, from 8 to 5, but don't, there's no emailing, nothing after, and getting pretty rigid about that. But for other people, that flexibility is so important. So for some people, they may want to, not start until 10 o'clock, but then they're going to be sending emails at 7 p.m. But so helping us have those conversations in the workplace about what that means, and that so setting boundaries that are appropriate yet flexible, I think that's the needle we've got to thread, right? And it's not an easy thing to do, but
every company kind of has to write their own plan essentially, because as we've talked about, everyone is unique, and so there is no one size fits all solution for this. So got to think creatively.
But I think this is leadership. This is a lot of leadership and management training that we're all being trained on now of how to talk to our employees, how to understand what the boundaries are, right? We are all going through this new training a little bit differently than we did in the past, because to your point, your data is right there at your fingertips at all times. Going back to a question you asked about small business, I think it's the same. I think when you look at smaller companies, leadership, owners, managers just need to connect with their employees again. I think we got out of that. I think bad habits in the past that we did not realize that your employees are your assets. Many people did, but and now it's coming back, and you have to. I think small businesses is very easy. My husband has a small business. You just need to connect to your employees. You need to understand what's important to them and help them through certain things, right? I think that connection, it all goes back to human connection, and I think that's why so much of mental health is such a factor right now, because we forgot to connect. We're even teens. I mean, if you look at kids now, it's really challenging. They're so used to their device, just talking to one another. I honestly think that human connection would help them so much more. Being back into school helps them so much more than over the pandemic when they were separated. You just start to see the change. I think people forget how much that human interaction
It doesn't
means.
have to be a Zoom. It can be a coffee.
Yes.
And I think building on that, that human connection is so important to going beyond employee assistance programs. So you mentioned, EAP, and what we've learned is that EAP, or employee assistance programs, are not enough. We really need to do more. We talked about that environment piece, but also just even around when employees are struggling. It needs to be a much more proactive approach, and leaders need to get a little bit more involved than they have in the past, appropriately so.
Right.
One of the things that we've learned is that our leaders needed more help in knowing how to respond to employees who are struggling. So we just rolled out this year a program called Psychological First Aid Training for our leaders. So our goal this year is to have 50% of our people leaders trained in psychological first aid by the end of this fiscal year. It does not mean that we're just turning our leaders into counselors or therapists, but it means like this is real. This is happening. There's data out there that shows that it's 75% of employees are now suffering from symptoms of at least one mental health condition. So it's out there, it's happening, whether you know it or not. And leaders need the skill and tools to recognize when someone's struggling, respond effectively, and get them connected to the appropriate resources that exist in your organization.
Programs like that, are those available to other businesses to take advantage of? Like, where can businesses and employers look for training for their managers?
There are companies, and I don't know what company you use. We have the same type of program. It's called Mental Health First Aiders. And again, it's the same type of program that our leadership should be going through so that they can recognize when somebody needs to be connected, right? So I'm sure there are companies out there. I'm sure we're probably using two different. So I know that we searched, we have a contract with wellness coaches, so they were able to connect us with that program. I'm not sure who.
We developed ours in-house. As 3 of the psychologists that work for our Center for Work-Life Wellbeing developed the program in-house, and we're hoping to be able to share it elsewhere, but it's been incredibly impactful to date, and we've gotten great feedback. So those are the sort of things that I think bring employers to the next level of creating that truly supportive environment that decreases the barriers to help seeking in your organization.
Definitely. Well, we're almost out of time, so I want to transition to our last little segment that we're calling Convo Connection. Just a little moment for us to give a shout out to someone or an organization in Delaware that's doing something really awesome. Heather, I'll let you go first.
Sure. So if you know me at all, I'm a huge animal lover, so that's always on my radar screen. But there's the National Wildlife Rehabilitators Association is having their annual symposium at the Chase Center. So that's an event to be on the lookout for. There's all of the other dogs and cats often get lots of attention, but maybe not the wildlife. So I'm going to plug for wildlife rehabilitation.
Love that. Jackie?
And I am going to plug, with AstraZeneca there in Fairfax, I'm going to plug the Avenue North campus. Brandywine Investment Group is doing a major development at the site. The brouhaha opened a few months ago, and there is all the retail going up. So just a big shout out to them to get some great retail and food suppliers or vendors there for Wilmington.
That brouhaha is my favorite.
It is a great one.
I haven't been to it yet, but I've seen pictures. And it's really cute inside.
It is.
I'm excited that the chamber, actually with ChristianaCare later this year, we're having a networking breakfast at Avenue North because we want to bring the business community to kind of see all the development that's happening. An amazing project. I've seen renderings of what it's going to look like when it's done, and I can't wait. I'm glad I live nearby so I can take advantage.
And the reason I brought that up is because they are trying to make that connection, live, work, play for the employees and for people there as well, so that we can get out and take those walks again outside, what we can't do right now with the construction. I think they're trying to bring that into Wilmington and to Delaware, which I think is much needed.
I agree. I'm going to give a shout out to a person, Susan Kelleher at Comores Company. She was on our podcast last season, and we talked about remote work and culture. She gave me the best idea about taking walking meetings. So instead of sitting at a desk with a person or a Zoom or a phone call, let's take a walk and just get out, get fresh air, and talk. I thought it was the best idea, and I tell you, my coworkers and I have implemented it, and we're really loving it. So I'm going to share the idea.
I think that's great.
Yeah. So Heather, if anyone wanted to get in contact with you, questions, ideas, how can they reach you?
LinkedIn is probably the best way. And similarly, I encourage you to follow our Center for Work-Life Wellbeing and ChristianaCare on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter.
And Jackie, how can they reach you?
Same thing. I think LinkedIn would probably be the best way.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for joining me. I really enjoyed the conversation. So this was great.
Great.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.